Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Chaf He. Nu Mishnah Nishpach Adam al haritzpa ba'asafo pasul. If someone does shechita on a korban, and then the kohen, instead of receiving the blood into a vessel directly from the neck, if instead the blood squirts out of the neck and goes onto the floor, and then he collects it in a bowl, then the korban is disqualified, is no good. So the basic law is that hidu shechita, that blood has to go directly into the bowl. Now, if afterwards it's collected in the bowl, and then as he's walking, it spills out of the bowl and falls on the floor, and he collects it from the floor back into the bowl, that's okay, as long as he initially collected it in a bowl. So that's the main point of this Mishnah, that has to go from the neck directly into the bowl, and if it goes from the neck onto the floor and he gathers it afterwards, the entire korban is pasul. Gemara will give a derivation. Tenor Banan, v'lakacha kohen hamashiach midam hapar, midam hanefesh, v'lo midam haor, v'lo midam hatamsit. The Braita quotes a pasuk first from here. The context is the korban hatat that a kohen gadol brings if he makes a mistake and sins. And the pasuk says, "V'lakach Adam hakohen hamashiach midam hapar ve'bioto el ol moed." So it's referring to Kabbalah. He's receiving the blood, and says kohen hamashiach, the kohen gadol, has to take midam hapar. So the mem is a limiting word. So what is it limiting? So the first part of the Baraita is giving us another law. We're going to learn the law of the Mishnah in the next part. And this part says, when he takes from the blood, he doesn't have to collect all of the blood of the entire animal. Rather, he has to take the blood of life. The life blood is the blood that squirts out right when you do shechita. The heart is still pumping, and it pumps out blood, and it dies with that blood. So that blood is the life force of the animal. That's the blood that must be collected into the bowl. What you don't need is dam ha'or, the blood of the skin. When you take the knife and you first cut the skin, so some blood will come out from the little veins in the skin. That's not the life blood. That you don't need. And you also don't need the blood that will come out afterwards, after the main squirt of blood from the neck. When it dies, then there's still going to be blood that will pour out afterwards, but that is not the lifeblood. So midam hapar teaches some of the blood, the lifeblood, and not all the blood. Midam hapar, dam mehapar yikabelenu. And now we learn yet another thing from the mem, that midam hapar, it has to be dam mehapar, the blood has to be directly from the par, right? Dam me, the me, we're taking the word mem to go with from the par. So it has to go directly from the animal into the bowl and not stop anywhere in between, not on the floor and not anywhere else. midam hapar kedichtib midam ואפילו מקצת דם, והמערב השוחט צריך שיקבל את כל דמו של פר שנאמר, ואת כל דמו ישפוך. Now this mem, in order to read it the way we just did, you have to take the mem and basically move it to the par, to say the dam will come me hapar. You see how in the derasha, the pasuk says mi dam hapar, but in the midrash, the dam is by itself, and the mem is moved to mehapar, blood from the par. So we're reading it in that way, because if you think that it means the mem is going on the dam to say that you don't need all the blood, and therefore you only need some of the blood, but that's not true, because Rav said the one who does shechita has to receive all of the blood, as it says, Vet kol damo yishpoch. This is a pasuk a little bit later on in that same paragraph that says, V'natan kohen min hadam al kontam mizbach ketoret hasamim lifnei Adonai. The kohen is going to take from that blood and put it on the corners of the mizbeach. Asher ba'al moed. Vet kol dam hapar yishpoch yisod mizbach ha'olah. And all the blood he will pour onto the foundation, the bottom of the mizbeach, asher petach ol moed. Now, how could this be? If you already took some of the blood and dabbed it on the corners, on the top of the mizbeach, well, he doesn't have all the blood anymore. And so we learn from this, therefore, that all the blood is referring to the fact that he has to collect all of the blood of the nefesh, meaning not the other blood, the ha'or and damatamsit, but all the blood of the nefesh he must lechatechila, he has to receive. So Rav says he has to receive all of it, as it says, vet kol damo yishpoch. And therefore, the mi dam cannot be referring to only some of the blood, because lechatechila, he's supposed to collect all of it. Ela mi dam hapad, dam mehapad ikabelenu. Vekasabar gorin mosifin vedorshin. Rather, when it says the mem, mi damapad, we have to going to move the mem and over to the pad to say it has to be received directly from the pad. And this methodology of midrash is called gorin. We remove a letter and we add it somewhere else, and then we interpret it. And so, because it obviously doesn't mean that you are taking only some of the blood, because Rav says l'chetechila, you should get all the blood. Therefore, we move it, and that means that the blood must come directly from the neck into the bowl, and that's the source for the Mishnah's law. Gufa. Now that we quoted Rav, let's analyze it further. Amar Rav Yuda Amar Rav, Hashochet tzarich shekabel et kol damo shel par, shenemar, ve'et kol dam hapar yishpoch, ve'ha b'shiraim ketiv. So the Rav said that someone who does shechita has to receive all the blood of the par, as it says, kol dama par yishpoch. Now, that pasuk is talking about the remainder of the blood after you sprinkled it. So therefore, it's actually impossible to say that you're going to pour all of the blood onto the foundation of the altar, because you already took some of the blood and you sprinkled it on top of the corners of the mizbeach. Therefore, if this kol dam is not talking about the leftovers, because the leftovers is not all the blood. Therefore, it must be that this kol dam is referring to a different law. What's the other law? It's talking about Kabbalah. And so that's Rav's derivation from this pasuk, even though this pasuk is after the sprinkling, and sounds like it's talking about that all the blood has to be poured out onto the foundation of the mizbeach, but that's impossible. So therefore, this kol dam must be referring to the Kabbalah that was done over here, and this mi dam hapad, although we learn two things from it: that one, that has to be directly from the neck, and also that you don't have to get the skin, the blood from the beginning of the skin and the blood at the end, but rather the dam hanefesh, all of that blood is necessary. Amar Rav Yuda Amar Shemuel, Hashochet tzarich sheyagbiya sakin lema'ala, shenemar velakach mi dam hapar velo mi dam hapar vedabar acher. We learn another law from this. It's actually just an application of the law. Shemuel says, once you do shechita, the shochet has to take the knife and hold it high up, so that the blood does not drip from the knife into the bowl. Don't take the knife and put it in the bowl or put it near the bowl. Rather, put it high up so it won't drop into the bowl. Why? Because the pasuk says, take from the blood of the pod. So that means the blood has to go from the animal directly into the bowl, and not from the animal and also from something else. If it goes from the bowl to the knife and from the knife to the bowl, then no, that's not directly from the bowl. It has to go from the bowl to the bowl and not onto the knife first. So obviously there's going to be some blood on the knife, but that blood on the knife cannot go into the bowl. Now we're going to have to clean the knife, so how are we going to clean it? What are we going to do with that blood? Because you want that blood to be somehow, so it is blood from the animal, so you want it to be somewhere important, but you need to clean the knife, because otherwise it'll congeal. Then you're going to do the next korban, you're going to have the leftover from that blood, from the first blood, so you have to clean it. How do we clean it to recognize that this is still special blood, even though you can't put it in the bowl? And the answer is, we'll wipe it on the outer rim of the bowl, so that it'll be wiped down, it'll be connected to the bowl, but not on the inside, it'll just be wiped on the outside. And the hint to this is in Sefer Ezra, that it calls them atoning bowls, keforeh, same word as kippur, but that word also means to wipe. It's the same meaning. To lechaper means to cover over or wipe away, cleanse from sin. And so here they're called cleansing bowls, atoning bowls, cleansing bowls, because you can also use them to wipe the knife on the outside of the bowl. Amar Rav Chisda Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, hashochet tzarich sheiten veridin letoch hakeli. Rav Chisda, name of Rav Yirmiyah Bar Abba, says, when you do shechita, you have to take the veins and put them into the vessel so that as the blood comes out, the blood will go directly from the veins of the animal right into the bowl. Itmar nameh, amar Rav Aseh, amar Rabbi Yochanan, v'ridin sarich sheyir'u avir keli. Another statement from Rabbi Yochanan that's similar and says that the veins have to see the airspace of the vessel. In other words, you don't have to put the veins directly into the bowl that they're pouring out directly into the bowl, but rather, even if it's not touching the bottom of the bowl, it's just in the airspace above the bowl. That's sufficient. So we see here that the airspace of the bowl is considered part of the bowl already, and that's going to be the main subject of the next inquiry. Ba'amine Rabbi Aseh Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Aseh asked Rabbi Yochanan, "Haya mekabel v'nifchatu shulei mizrak ad shelo higia adam la'avir mahu." Let's say a guy's holding a bowl, the kohen's holding a bowl to receive the blood, and then the bowl is weak, not made so well, and so now the blood from the animal squirted out. It's in the airspace above the bowl. But in the meantime, the bottom of the bowl fell out. Now there's no bottom of the bowl. So what do we say? Do we say that the blood, even though it didn't reach the bottom of the bowl, but it reached the airspace of the bowl while the bottom was there, and then while it was going down, the bottom fell out? What do we say about that? Is it considered as if it already landed or not? Avir she'en sofo lanuach kimunach tameh or lo kimunach tameh. Do we say that airspace where it will not end up landing? It's not going to end up landing because by the time it gets there, the bottom will have fallen out. Do we say that it's like it landed already because it's in the airspace? And if so, if it did land already, then that blood is considered collected. You did Kabbalah. Good. It falls on the floor. Okay, collect it from the floor because you're allowed to do that after. And then it would be a kosher sacrifice. Or do we say that, no, it's in the air, and but it's never even going to fall, even if you wouldn't do anything? The bottom is no good, and it falls out. And since it was never even destined to fall down onto the bottom, it's no good at all. So what do you say about that law? Amar le tenituha, chavit shemunachat tachat hazinuk, maim shebetocha shebechutza la pesulin. Seref pia la zinuk, maim shebetocha pesulin, shebechutza la kesherin. This braita is talking about the water that you need to get to prepare para aduma. That has to be mayim chayim. It has to come from a flowing spring water, and you have to collect it into a vessel that is designated to be used for the para aduma waters. Now, what if you have a chavit, a barrel that's not designated? Therefore, if the water falls into this barrel, then it's no good, cannot be used anymore for the para aduma water. And this barrel is under a pipe. A pipe is flowing with water. This water is flowing from a natural source. It can go through a pipe, even though it's a metal pipe or a clay pipe that's man-made. That's okay because it's open on both sides. So it's just going to flow through. It's not considered that it's being collected into a vessel. So it's flowing from a natural spring and it's going through a pipe. And then there's a barrel underneath that's collecting the water. Now it's on its way down. Now here's the thing. It's on its way down, but you could go and get a different vessel that is designated for the collecting para aduma and interrupt the flow. So what's the law? Can you do that and interrupt the flow and then it would be kosher? Or do we say that since it's in the airspace of the chavit that's no good, that means it's already no good? Well, here the Braita says that if you have the barrel that's under the zinuk, that's the flowing water, the water that's in the barrel, and also the water that's outside the barrel but is about to fall into it, that's in the airspace of the barrel, is pasul. And so this is the answer. From here we learn that water that's in the airspace of a vessel is already considered as if it fell into the vessel. And then even if you go quickly and stick another vessel and interrupt it, it's no good because it's already considered as if it fell down into the vessel. That's the law of chavit, and we can learn from the law of chavit to the law of the blood that goes into a mizrak. This is a good way to distinguish the two cases because we're going to see some discussion about them. So the mizrak, which is just a bowl, That's talking about catching the blood, whereas the chavit is catching the water for para aduma. The Braita goes on for another law and says, seref pia la zinuk, if you had this pipe and you attached the barrel to the mouth of the pipe, so that's going directly from the pipe into the barrel, then the water that is in the barrel, that fell into the barrel already, is no good, because it was not designated for para aduma water. But whatever water is not in the barrel, it's still in the pipe, that's okay. Even though it's attached and that water is going to go from the pipe directly into the barrel, doesn't matter because it's still in the pipe and it's still flowing. So if you'd go there and interrupt and catch it before it goes into the barrel, then that would be okay. So here is a proof Rabbi Yochanan says that just like the water, the blood, just like the water that is going into in the airspace of the barrel is considered already in the barrel, and therefore pasul in this case, so too the blood that's in the airspace of this bowl is considered part of the bowl. And although afterwards the bottom fell out and it went on the floor, it's considered collected and it's okay. We reject this. The answer is not the same as the question. The question was airspace of a vessel where it will not end up landing. It's not going to end up landing in it because the bottom falls out. That's a more difficult question than the one that he answered. He answered if it goes into a vessel and the vessel in the end will collect it. It will settle in the vessel. There, it's more likely to say, okay, it's on its way there. It ends up catching it, so it's already in the airspace. It's already caught. So even if you say that's considered part in the vessel, but when it's not going to land in the vessel because the bottom's going to come out, maybe not. So that's not really an answer. So we explain further. In fact, Rabbi Aseh asked two questions. We only recorded one, but he asked two questions. He asked the one that we said. After he asked the question that we mentioned before, above regarding the vessel and the blood, he asked, and if you decide and answer the first question and say that the airspace of a vessel that's not going to end up catching it is not considered airspace and is not considered as if it's already in it because it's not going to end up landing, what about a case where it will end up landing in it? Well, that's the question, and Rabbi Yochanan brought the Baraita about the Chavit to answer the second question, and therefore the answer doesn't answer both questions, but at least it answers the second one. Rav Yosef Matneh Hachi. Everything we just learned, that's the version that Rav Yosef taught. But there's another version. Rav Kahana Matneh Chavit Be'amineh Ufshat Le Chavit. According to Rav Kahana, Rabbi Aseh's question was only one question about the Chavit, where it's a closed vessel that it will end up landing in it. And that was Rabbi Aseh's question. If it's in the airspace of a vessel that will end up catching it, is that considered already in it? And he said yes, because he quoted this the Baraita of the Paraduma water going to the Chavit, and there was no question about the vessel that would open up at the bottom. That's the second version. A third version, Rabba matne chavit be'amine ufashat le mizrak. Yata modeh be'mizrak she'i efshar lo belo zinuk. Rabba said, no, he asked him a question about the chavit, if the water is going into a barrel that it will end up going into. Is the airspace considered as if it's already in there? In that case, that water would not be good for para aduma. That was Rabbi Aseh's question, and Rabbi Yochanan answered it from a case of blood going into a mizrak, into a bowl. Rabbi Yochanan says, wouldn't you agree in the case of the blood going into the bowl that it's impossible to catch it without assuming that the stream is part of the bowl? Why? Because whenever you're doing shechita, the blood is not like you can't put the neck directly into the bowl while you're doing shechita. Obviously, it's going to go through the airspace. So you put the bowl underneath to catch it, but it's going to be going through the airspace first. Now, we said the halacha has to be that it goes directly from the neck into the bowl. If you say the airspace is not part of the bowl, well then that's an interposition. It's going It's going from the neck into the air, and then from the air into the bowl, and that would be no good. So therefore, it must be that the airspace of the bowl is considered already part of the bowl, and therefore, as long as it's somewhere, the blood is coming out somewhere above the width of the bowl, then that's okay, and that's an answer. So just like it answered, so the mizrak, just like it has to be true for the mizrak, therefore has to be true for the chavit as well. Tenan hatam. Now we have a related mishnah in Masechet Para. Natan yado o raglo o ale yerakot kedei sheyavru ma'im lechavit pesulin ale kanim v'ale egozin keshera. Again, we're collecting water for the para aduma preparation, and the water has to be from a spring, and it's going from some spring far away, and it's going through the above some ground, and it's coming down. And now you want to divert the water a little so that it will go into the vessel that you designated for it, but it's missing. It's a little bit off, and so you go and put your hand or your foot, or if you take vegetable leaves and you put them and you make like a little dam, a little temporary channel in order to go into the bowl, into the barrel, it's no good, because these are all things that are mikabel tumah. A person's hands and feet or vegetables that are edible are mikabel tumah, and therefore this is no longer a natural source. It can go over dirt and stuff like that, and rocks, but it can't be something that's mikabel tumah, so then it's not called natural water anymore, going directly into the vessel. However, if you use reed leaves or leaves from nuts that are not edible, those are not mikabel tumah, they're not usable, and therefore that's considered just a natural thing, part of the ground, so it's a natural waterway, and therefore it's still kosher. And the Mishnah gives you the general principles. If you're using something that is susceptible to tumah, which is something that would be a vessel or a person, a person's body part, then that's not called a natural spring anymore. But if it's something that's not susceptible to tumah, so it's not a kli, it's not something that would be usable, then it's just a natural thing, and therefore that you can use to make a temporary channel. What's the source? Tamar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Yosef bar Abba Amar Kera ach ma'ayan ubor mikveh ma'im yeh tahor havayatan al yedeh tahora teheh. Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yosef bar Abba, quotes a pasuk in Vayikra that talks about a fountain or a cistern where there is a gathering of water shall be pure. So a gathering of water makes a mikveh, and it's pure. There's no way to make unpure. Even if you put a tameh thing in a mikveh, the mikveh will always be pure. And so we learn from this yihiyeh tahor that their being must be a way of purity. In other words, that the gathering of water cannot be used by something that can receive impurity. So you're trying to collect some water to use for para aduma, but you want to collect that water, well, the way that you collect it has to be in a tahor way. So something that is not susceptible to tumah can be used to collect the water. But something that is susceptible to tumah, it cannot be used for the collection of that water. Amar Rabbi Chia, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Zot omeret avir keli kechli dameh. Rabbi Yochanan says, we can learn from this Mishnah that the airspace of a vessel is considered already part of the vessel, and any blood that is in that airspace, or water that's in that airspace, is already as if it's collected. How does he know that? Because if you would say not so, then putting your hand in the way would be okay. Imagine water coming off of, let's like a waterfall, a cliff, and it's going in the wrong place and it's not getting into the vessel. And so you put your hand somewhere near the top and divert it. Well, in that case, it should be fine, because if you put your hand and divert the water upstream, it's still okay, because after that it's flowing down natural places, and so that's still spring water. So in this case, if you diverted it as it falls off the cliff, and then you push it so that it's going above the vessel, well, it still has to go through the airspace and is going directly from the air into the vessel, and then that would be okay. It's going from a natural source, the air, into the vessel, and that would be okay. The only reason, but that's not what the Mishnah says. The only reason why the Mishnah says you cannot use your hand is because when you're diverting, it's falling off the cliff, off the waterfall, and then you put your hand to divert the flow. Well, then you're diverting the flow directly into the airspace. And once it goes directly from your hand into the airspace is already part of the vessel. It's going directly from your hand into the vessel. And that is the problem. And so that would only be a problem to use your hand if the airspace is considered part of the vessel itself. Amar le Rabbi Zera Rabbi Chiya bar Abba v'dilma b'shotet. But Rabbi Zera told Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, how is that a proof? Maybe the water is not falling with a lot of force, but maybe it's just flowing weakly, and therefore it's just coming down. It's just missing it a little bit, and you put your hand right next to the vessel, and so that it flows off your hand and goes right in the vessel directly without going into the airspace. And maybe that's why it's no good, because it's going directly, since it's a weak flow. So you could just put your hand in the way, and it'll flow off your hand right into the vessel, and that's why it's no good. But in fact, if it was higher up and with a stronger flow, and it was going through the air, maybe it would be okay, because the air is not part of the vessel. So how is there a proof from here? And Rabbi Chiya bar Abba says, you imbecile. Well, tough words for him, but because you look at the wording of the Mishnah, it says Kedesh Ya'avru, so that it will pass so that the water will be diverted to the chavit. And that pass indicates that it's through the air, not that you're just pushing the water with your hand, but rather that there's a strong stream that you have to divert in the middle of the air through it, and therefore it actually is a good proof. Another statement from Rabbi Yochanan on this subject. This Mishnah that we learned in Masechet Parah is actually based on an earlier Mishnah in Masechet Eduyot, where Rabbi Sadok gave the following testimony. Ditnan, Ha'id Rabbi Sadok ala zochalin, shekilechan be'alei gozin, she'en kesherin. Zehi ha'maaseh be'ohalya, uba maaseh livnei chamim b'lishkat hagazit ve'hichshiru. Rabbi Sadok gave testimony regarding the rivulets, these small streams that are diverted with leaves of nuts, which are not mekabel tumah. That's okay, because it's not mekabel tumah, so you can use that to redirect a mayim chayim, a natural flow of water. And there was a case just like this in a place called Ohalya, and the case came to the sages in Lishkat HaGazit, the Sanhedrin there, and they said it's kosher, and it's based on that testimony that we know the law in the Mishnah in Masechet Parah. Amar Rabbi Zera Amar Rabbi Hasorem Ozen Hapar Ve'achar Kach Kibel Damo Pasur Shene'emar Ve'lakach Midam Hapar Par Shaya Kevar. Another law that we learned from that same pasuk back in Vayikra about the parachatach of the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Zera says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi that if someone is doing shechita and then by mistake they slit the ear of the bull, after they do shechita, but before they do Kabbalah, it's no good, because then the animal has a blemish. So of course, the animal has to be not unblemished when you do shechita. That for sure we know. But the chidush here is that it also has to be unblemished even after the shechita when you're doing the Kabbalah. How do you know? Because the pasuk says, take from the blood of the pod as it was before without a blemish. Now, even though its neck is slit, so that's not so good, but the point is, besides that, no other blemish, even a small slit in the ear. Ashkachan kodshe kodashim kalim min elan. Now, we know that's true for Kodesh Kodashim, like this Parachatat. But is that true also for Kadashim Kalim? Amar Rava Tanya, Se Tamim Zachar Ben Shana. It says regarding Korban Pesach, which is Kadashim Kalim, that it has to be a lamb without a blemish, a male, 1 year old, within 1 year old. Sheyehet Tamim Uben Shana Bishat Shechita. From here we learn it has to be unblemished and has to be within its first year at the time of Shechita. How do you know that it has to also be unblemished when you do the Kabbalah, Holacha, and throwing of the blood? Talmud Omar, Yihye kol havayotav lo yiyu ela tam uben shana. Since the pasuk says, "Se tamim zachar ben shana yihye," it will be. That means in all the beings and all the happenings to it, whatever you do with it, it has to have also this definition. And so therefore, Kadashim Kalim also has to be unblemished during the Kabbalah. Iti be'abaye, Rabbi Yoshua Omer, Kol ha-zevaḥim shebatorah she'yishtayer mehen kezayit basar or kezayit chaleb zorekat hadam. Abaye challenges this law, because Rabbi Yoshua says that regarding all Zevaḥim in the Torah, if all that's left of the animal itself is just 1 kezayit of basar or 1 kezayit of cheleb, you can still sprinkle the blood. So you see the sprinkling of the blood can be done even though the animal is mostly missing, it's chopped up, all you have is a kezayit. So surely if that's all you have, a kezayit, where the rest, who knows what happened to the rest of the animal, but surely that would be called blemished. So therefore, you can't really say that this pasuk here that says Set Tamim Ezachar and so on, it refers to Kabbalah and Holacha and Zerika, because here Zerika certainly can be done even if it has a blemish. Targuma Aben Shana. And so we can explain that yes, it has to be Yihiyeh, means that during all the Havayot, during all the things that happens to it, it has to be Ben Shana. That's what's going on. Not on the word Tamim. It doesn't have to be unblemished, but it has to be within this first year when you do not only Shechita, but also Kabbalah, Holacha, and Zerika. Wait a second, how can you even have such a case? Is there such a thing where that the animal will be within its first year when you do Shechita, but when you do Holacha or Zerika, it's going to be 2 years old? You have to do the Holacha and Zerika on the same day as you do Shechita. You can't do it the next day. And so therefore, it's going to be on the same day. It's the same age. Amar Rava, Zot Omeret Sha'ot Postot Bekodashim. Rava says we can learn from here that the hour of the day is significant. So you have to know what hour was it born last year when it was born. And let's say it was born at 11 a.m. Now you did the Shechita at 10 a.m. Good. Okay, that's within the first year. But then if you come and to do the Holacha or the Zerika at noon, at 1 a.m., that's it. It's past its birth hour. And that makes it, so we take into account the hour, and that's how you could have such a case. And so that is what we learn from this pasuk instead. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.